Gracias. Obrigado. Auhatin gihanyoke imachigambia va andeni hipa va tatskaheni ingine ingitei tsutoni saai ingitei hanyo nyahi ke imareri konda se maka ingi ainde kuira ketson hecho puimbe. I am happy to be able to come and greet you people in this place that is far downriver for us. We live up in the headwaters. We are a people who are dedicated to maintaining and taking care of our forest, not just for ourselves, but for all of you, and this is the message that I would like to bring to you. The Cofan people are a small indigenous group that lives up in the northeastern corner of Ecuador and the southeastern corner of Colombia. I only number about 1,200 people in total. It's a group that has lived in the forest and with the forest for many, many, many centuries. But when my parents first arrived there in the 1950s, it was a very, very small group isolated in a huge Amazonia with living a proud life on the rivers, but very, very distant from everything. My mother and father were missionaries, and I was born just a little bit to the south of the actual Cofan village where I grew up. My parents took me there when I was about 2 months old. It was quite a thing for the whole village because it was the first white baby that anybody had ever seen, but that wore off very quickly, and I grew up just as another one of the Cofan people in the village. Small village of probably 120 people, more or less, when I was growing up. Our culture was a culture that was based completely on the forest. It was completely revolving around what we could take from the forest, and we had no concept at the time that it could ever change. Our houses were built from the materials that we found there at hand. We were able to transport ourselves up and down the rivers. In fact, some of the older Cofans had been down to Manaus in the previous generation, actually my father-in-law. This particular household was a household that I spent a lot of time in personally because I really liked it. There's another reason that I'll show you in just a minute. But if you look around in the house, as I looked at the picture, I realized that we have just about everything in that picture comes directly from the rainforest. And we didn't have to take anything from the outside world. We have one aluminum pot sitting over in the corner, but everything else is a product of the rainforest. Our artwork, our social life, our ability to create things that were really truly comfortable, for instance, the hammock, and our interface on a very, very small level with the outside world were all important parts of what we were trying to live at the time. The older man in this picture was my dad's closest friend in the village. They were very, very close friends. He was the chief of the village, a man named Guillermo. My memories of Guillermo are that he was not only the chief, but he was also, because of his shamanism, he never took a bath. And so when he would try to hold me on his lap, it was always this overwhelming sensory experience that I remember to this day. But it was an extremely attractive culture, extremely rich culture where we lived in harmony with ourselves, with each other, with the environment around us. This old lady was the reason why I was so attracted to that particular house, and she eventually became my great-grandmother-in-law when I married my wife Amelia. She was always good to roast the lizard that we'd catch with our blowgun or whatever like this. And this was my uncle. This was my very, very treasured uncle that I would live with then. This world was a world of unlimited resources, a world that is just about impossible for us to understand at this point in time. It all changed dramatically in the 1960s when all of a sudden the oil companies began to come in. And as the oil companies poured into the area, they brought tractors, they brought roads, they brought our first taste of pollution as our rivers that we had been able to drink out of directly previously all of a sudden began to run with crude oil and with chemicals that we didn't even have names for. I remember catching a fish, and now he's one of my brother-in-laws, he says, hey, this stinks, it doesn't smell right. and we were faced suddenly with a world that was completely different and completely ignored us. Our chiefs died out. Guillermo, who was in the picture previously, Pacho Quintero from the San Miguel, died out during this stage and were replaced by trucks carrying pipelines and pasture, grass, just an incredible, incredible impact for our culture. Towns grew up in areas where we had previously used for our hunting and our fishing and our subsistence agriculture. All of a sudden, the Cofans were considered an extinct tribe. Anthropologists began to talk about their having disappeared. We began a resistance in the 1970s that was a small group of young people that began to analyze deeply who we were. And when we began that analysis, we found that we, aside from our language, aside from our cultural attributes, aside from dance, aside from spiritual things, aside from everything else, we were a people of the rainforest. And without our rainforest, we could no longer existed. We began a period of resistance that over the next few years, we were able to organize ourselves, and we were able to recover, at this point, about 430,000 hectares of our original territories. Our original territories were probably about 10 times, maybe 15 times as large as that, but we were able to recover the control over these lands during that period of time. As we did that, we also developed methodologies that would allow us to then protect this area in the face of a relentless push from the outside world to take the resources from those areas for short-term needs. In this case, we had our park guards. At the moment, we have a core group of about 50 park guards, Cofan park guards, that patrol the areas. Relations with the government are the president of the federation, the Cofan Federation, with the president of Ecuador, and the infrastructure that we've had to develop along with that. In the process, we began slowly to realize that we weren't just preserving this for ourselves. And this goes directly into what Antonio was just telling us about. The preservation for ourselves is a minimal part of what we're doing. The challenge that we are facing at the moment is the rest of the world. How do we go about making this something that the rest of the world will also buy into? Other indigenous groups have become very, very interested in the procedure that we've been doing in our model, and at the moment we're working in about 1,500,000 hectares of rainforest with indigenous groups who are actively in the same mode that we are. We're convinced, indigenous people, we know that we need the forest if we're going to be able to survive as people, as culture, as a world. The question here is whether the rest of the world is going to wake up to this and be willing to take on their part of the responsibility. This is not something that can happen in isolation. It's not something that indigenous groups are going to be able to handle on their own. We have tremendous economic pressures. Right now, we're talking about infrastructures. Right now, there's the Manta Manaus project. It's within a concept called IRSA. We're talking about transport system starting here in Manaus and going over the Andes Mountains to the Pacific coast to be able to access markets on the Pacific Rim. This is something that for the Cofan people, for the indigenous groups, is diametrically opposed to what we are visualizing, what Antonio was just telling, the experience of the Yanomami individual that is saying, we need this rainforest if we are going to survive as human beings. This is where our water is coming, this is where our climate is coming from. Until the world begins to buy into this, that's not going to happen. The central message that I bring to you from the Cofan people and from the other indigenous groups that we're working with is to help us wake up the world community to the economic reality that it's necessary to be, these forests are not just necessary for the survival of small indigenous groups out there that are quaint and interesting, or the biodiversity that's there, or whatever like that, but we're talking about survival of the planet. That's what I have come here to present to you, and thank you very much.